Hello everybody, this is already day 14 of rebuilding my Jaguar S-Type and the last chance to get any further in 2019. To keep updated on my project, consider subscribing, and if doing so, please also activate the notification bell. Today I will start with unplugging and removing the ignition coils, first on passenger side. Unlike previous designs, the plastic covers on my 4.2 V8 are not even screwed on. They only have to be lifted, and after a little wiggling around, they can easily be removed. Each of the covers is clamped onto two brass studs, and in my case the counterparts on the cover were both broken due to inappropriate handling in the past or just material fatigue. The ignition coils have to be removed separately. Each of these is plugged to the wiring harness and screwed to the engine head with an 8mm hex bolt. There's a tab on each of these plugs that has to be pressed down on the wire side and then raises up on the side where the plug is connected to the coil. You will see later I use a little screwdriver to help this procedure a little bit and prevent damaging the plugs. I haven't been that careful at the beginning of my project. In fact, I had planned to change out the so-called engine management wiring harness anyway. Now, a few days ago, I searched in the net and found out that not only the harness I need for my early 2003 model was quite expensive, but it's not even available anymore. Luckily, I found exactly the harness I need as a used part, and of course immediately ordered it for about 70 British pounds. I will decide later if I change out the harness as a whole or just interchange the few plugs that are broken on my car. At this point, my 8mm hex socket disappeared somewhere inside the engine compartment. I searched for around half an hour but couldn't find it anymore. Luckily, a second larger hex socket came with the set I use, so I was able to continue working. Of course, the last ignition coil on passenger side is hidden underneath the wiring harness, and there I had needed the short socket, but I was able to work around that by using an extension. By the way, the ignition coils are prone to fail on this car. It happened to me twice within a relatively short period of time, I think at around 100,000 miles. The car was idling fine, but as soon as I put it into drive, it ran like crap. When revving up, everything was smooth again, but soon the yellow check engine light came on, and with increasing load, especially on higher revs or when I was just holding a higher speed, this light started to flash, which obviously meant that I should stop what I'm doing. This time I was only around 30 miles away from home, and I managed to continue driving without the check engine light flashing too often. The dealership suggested not to change out only one, but all the coils at once. I denied because I think they had charged me 1,200 euros or even more for all the coils. Of course, I had better followed this advice because a few months later it happened again. That time I was on a trip in Prague around 200 miles away from home, and I didn't want to damage the engine, so I searched the dealership there. They had to order the ignition coil, and I left the car there. Unfortunately, I had to be back in office the next day already, so it was necessary to take the train home and return to Prague a week later for picking up the car. Altogether, I spent a lot of money, so if you own such a car, I would highly recommend to have a spare coil inside the trunk, especially on longer trips, because you see, changing them out is not a big deal. To figure out which coil is bad, of course, also requires a proper scan tool. As you could see on driver side, it was a little bit more difficult to reach the middle coils because of the fuel filter assembly mounted there, but it wasn't a big problem. On this side, 3 of the 4 coils were contaminated with oil, which tells me that the valve cover seals are obviously leaking. No big deal, I will change them out anyway. At the end, I changed the camera position to give you a better insight in the exact process. If familiar with this, changing out an ignition coil is done in around 2 minutes, and it's unbelievable what they charge you if this is done by a professional workshop. Voila! In the next step, I want to detach and drain the steering fluid reservoir and the 2 hoses here. I had shifted the brackets already in the past, nevertheless getting the hoses off again required using water pump pliers and some patience. Even the official workshop manual admits that spilling fluid is unavoidable when disconnecting these hoses. So I helped myself with cutting off the top of a water bottle to drain the oil from the steering fluid reservoir. And as you can see, it worked out fine. Of course, the engine oil also has to be drained. On this car, the drain plug is located at the back side of the oil pan on passenger side, and bolt size is 16mm hex. Putting the pan underneath there changed the camera contrast settings. I'm sorry for that, but I think you can imagine what happens. The big ratchet helped to break the bolt free, and at the end the oil was draining. And finally for the day, I'm trying to detach the oil filter here in front of the engine. As always, when it's about twisting off such an old style oil filter, you can either use a universal tool or a special one for each size, as I do. The one required here is a 76/14 oil filter removal tool. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up. Next time I'm gonna continue with detaching the engine accessories. See you back then. Goodbye.